The first time I heard the laugh, I was wearing my mother's Goodwill brooch. Not that Patricia Carrington noticed. She never noticed anything real. She stood on that stage in front of 500 people, politicians, donors, the entire social ladder of Greenwich, and she pointed. Not with her hand. With her smile. A slow, surgical turn of her head until her eyes found my mother at table 14. Then she leaned into the microphone and said 6 words. That's not a mother. That's trash. The room didn't gasp. It contracted. Like every lung in that ballroom forgot how to work. And my fiancé, the man who had kissed my forehead 3 hours earlier, laughed. Not a nervous cough. Not a startled choke. A real laugh, clear and bright, because his mother had just nuked my family and he thought it was funny. I didn't scream. I didn't throw my wine glass. I folded my napkin, took my mother's hand, and walked out without looking back. Then I sat in the parking lot, pulled out my phone, and made one call. 3 words. Do it now. Here's what Patricia Carrington didn't know. What none of them knew. I had spent the last 6 months building a file. A quiet, meticulous, red-tabbed monster of a file. And her name was on every page. But you need to understand the beginning. Because that phone call only makes sense if you know what happened in the 6 months before it. My name is Ingrid Myers. I'm 32. I grew up in a 3rd-floor walk-up in Bridgeport, apartment 4C, no elevator, no father, and a mother who worked nights as a school nurse for $38,000 a year. Ellen Myers didn't complain. Not once. Not when she got home at 11 p.m. and found me asleep over my homework. Not when she ironed my one good blouse on the floor because the ironing board broke. She drove me to Yukon in a car that shook above 55 miles per hour, dropped me off at the admissions building like she was handing me over to a better life, and then drove home alone. I studied accounting. Passed the CPA on the first try. Got hired at a Big 4 firm. Spent 6 years auditing nonprofits, then went independent. Forensic accounting. Fraud examination. I read spreadsheets the way detectives read crime scenes. By 32, I was making $95,000 a year. Not rich. Not struggling. Comfortable. The whole point of my life was to make sure my mother never had to iron a blouse on the floor again. Then I met Derek Carrington. He found me at a professional mixer in Stamford. 34 years old, ran donor relations for his family's foundation, had the kind of easy confidence that comes from never having to prove anything to anyone. He smiled with his whole face. He asked questions and actually listened. 3rd date, he told me the Carrington Foundation funded after-school programs across 3 Connecticut counties. Budget of $2.8 million a year. His mother was board chair. His father was treasurer. I told him my mother was a retired school nurse from Bridgeport. He said, that's the most important job in any school. I believed him. 6 months later, he took me home to Greenwich. 6 bedrooms. Circular driveway. Hydrangeas trimmed like they had a personal stylist. Patricia opened the door in cashmere. Howard stood behind her in a blazer with monogrammed cuffs. Dinner was salmon on fine china. Real silver. Patricia asked about my family. I told her my father left when I was 4. She paused, set down her wine glass, and let the silence stretch until it became its own comment. Howard asked what my mother did for a living. Retired school nurse, I said. He nodded once and changed the subject to wine regions. Then Patricia laughed. High-pitched. Practiced. The kind of laugh that doesn't come from amusement, it comes from a decision to perform it. How charming, she said. That laugh. I'd hear it again in front of 500 people. Over the next 14 months, Patricia built a pattern so consistent you could set a calendar by it. The bridal shower came first. My mother wasn't on the guest list. When I asked why, Patricia tilted her head and said, "Oh, I assumed she wouldn't be comfortable with our crowd." Like she was explaining why a child wasn't invited to an adult party. Gentle. Pity stitched into every syllable. Christmas was next. Patricia handed me a $400 wool coat from Nordstrom. She handed my mother a $15 candle from the drugstore. In front of everyone. My mom said thank you. Patricia said, I thought something simple would suit her. Then the seating chart for the annual gala. 3 weeks before Mother's Day, I overheard Patricia on the phone with Derek. Her voice was low, but the kitchen carried sound. She's lovely, but that mother. Derek, promise me the seating chart keeps her away from the Wentworths. I won't have her embarrassing us. I stood in the hallway with a glass of water and listened to my fiancé say nothing. I told Derek about all of it. The guest list. The candle. The seating chart. The texts from his Aunt Vivian sending me articles about navigating established families. He rubbed the back of his neck, his towel, and said, that's just how she is. She means well. 5 words. That was his entire defense of my mother. My mom came to visit on a Tuesday. She sat at my kitchen table, flipping through bridal magazines, stopping at a photo of a bride and her mother walking down an aisle together. You happy, baby? I looked at her. 58 years old. Hands rough from decades of bandaging scraped knees and checking fevers. Hair graying at the temples. I am, I said. She set the magazine down. Then I'm happy. She knew. My mother wasn't stupid. She'd survived 22 years of night shifts, a husband who disappeared, and a system that paid her less than a starting barista. She could read a room faster than I could read a balance sheet. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small box. Inside was a brooch. A cluster of tiny pearls on a gold-colored pin. For the gala, she said. I want to look nice for your night. $12. Goodwill clearance bin. I knew because she forgot to peel off the price sticker. It's beautiful, Mom. She pinned it on her blouse and smiled. Then she said something I didn't fully understand until much later. You don't owe them your piece, baby. The Carrington Foundation had been around for 19 years. 8 million in annual donations. A gala every spring. A newsletter with Patricia's photo on the front, smiling next to children who depended on the money she raised. On paper, it was everything a community foundation should be. Derek asked me to help in February. 4 months before the gala. Their regular accountant had retired, and the annual audit was coming. Just a quick look, he said. Pro bono. As a favor to the family. I agreed. I wanted to help. I wanted Patricia to see me as useful. Competent. Someone who belonged at that table. I know how that sounds now. The foundation's office was above a real estate agency in Stamford. Manila folders in a filing cabinet, each one tabbed in red along the top edge. I opened the first folder. Vendor invoices. Payment authorizations. Standard nonprofit paperwork. The first invoice looked fine. Second looked fine. Third looked fine. The fourth did not. It was from a company called Hartfield Consulting. $113,000 for strategic advisory services. I turned the page. Same company, same amount. The year before. And the year before that. 3 years. 3 identical invoices. $339,000 to a single vendor I had never heard of. I pulled the folder from the cabinet and stared at the red tab pointing up like a small flag. That night, I searched for Hartfield Consulting. No website. No LinkedIn. No LLC filing in Connecticut, New York, or Massachusetts. I widened the search to Delaware, the state where shell companies go to hide. There it was. Hartfield Consulting LLC. Registered 14 months after the foundation's first fiscal year. Registered agent, a mailbox service in Wilmington. No employees. No office. No phone number. I pulled the bank routing numbers from the payment authorizations and cross-referenced them against the foundation's disbursement records. Every payment to Hartfield went to a single account at a regional bank in Fairfield County. The account was under the name Del Santo. Patricia's maiden name. 3 years. $340,000. From a children's charity to a shell company owned by the woman who chaired its board. In my line of work, there's a word for this. Embezzlement. I didn't panic. I didn't call anyone. I made copies of every invoice, every routing slip, every authorization form. I photographed the folder. I built a file, digital and paper, with a table of contents and a timeline. This is what forensic accountants do. We build files. We let numbers tell stories that people can't lie their way out of. When I finished, it was 2 a.m. I sat at my desk with the folder closed in front of me and thought about what came next. I had 2 choices. Tell Derek and let him handle it privately. Or go straight to the authorities. I chose Derek first. That was my mistake. I showed him the file on a Saturday morning. His coffee went cold on the counter while he turned pages. His face changed 3 times. Confusion first. Then recognition. Then something I had never seen on him before. Fear. There has to be an explanation, he said. There is, I said. It's called fraud. He closed the folder, rubbed the back of his neck, and walked to the window. Stood there for a long time looking at nothing. Let me talk to them, he said. Give me 3 months before the annual audit. We'll fix it internally. Quietly. No one has to know. I should have said no. I know that now. But I loved him. And love makes you give extensions to people who don't deserve them. 3 months, I said. If nothing changes, I go to the board. He agreed. Kissed my forehead. Left for his parents' house. I watched his car pull out and counted the reasons I should have called the state attorney general right then. After that, things shifted. Derek canceled dinner dates. Stopped mentioning his parents. When I asked about the foundation, he changed the subject. One night he came over for takeout and saw the manila folder sitting on my kitchen table. Red tabs up. What's that? He asked. Work, I said. He stared at it 3 seconds too long, then opened his noodles. Month 1. Derek said he talked to his parents. I asked what they said. They're looking into it. I asked for specifics. I don't have any yet. Month 2. I checked the foundation's disbursement records again. Hartfield Consulting had billed another $28,000. Authorized. Paid. Cleared. Whatever Derek told his parents, it hadn't slowed Patricia down by a single dollar. I showed him the new invoice. He went quiet. I told my dad, he finally said. He said it was a bookkeeping error. A bookkeeping error doesn't create a shell company, Derek. He had nothing for that. He picked up his keys and said he needed air. Month 3. The annual audit was 6 weeks away. The Mother's Day Gala was 2 weeks after that. I sat Derek down at my kitchen table, same folder, same red tabs, and laid it out. You didn't tell them. Or you told them and they ignored you. Either way, $340,000 is still missing from a charity that serves children. And I'm the only person in this equation with a professional license to lose. He stared at the folder. I'll handle it. You had 90 days to handle it. That night, I called my colleague Webb, a forensic audit partner who'd worked the state's nonprofit fraud unit before going private. I told him to finalize the report and hold it. I need one more thing, I said. A public event. Something on the record. The Mother's Day Gala was in 18 days. I wasn't waiting anymore. I was positioning. Patricia announced the gala's theme in the April newsletter, The Mothers Who Shaped Us. A tribute segment. A slideshow. A speech from the board chair herself, Patricia, honoring the mothers of the Carrington community. 500 guests confirmed. Local politicians. School board members. Foundation donors. 2 reporters from the Hartford Courant. And the entire social circle that revolved around Patricia like planets around a very expensive sun. She called me 11 days before the event. Her voice was smooth and measured, the way it always was when she was about to say something condescending. Your mother is welcome to attend, of course. Just make sure she's comfortable. Large events can be overwhelming for people who aren't used to them. She'll be at my table, I said. Pause. Of course. Aunt Vivian texted me that same afternoon. Heard your mom is coming to the gala. So brave of her. Smiley face. Heart emoji. I set my phone on the counter and stared at it for a full minute. Then I picked it up and almost called Webb. My thumb hovered over his name. Not yet. The audit file was in my car. A copy was in Webb's office safe. A third copy was on an encrypted drive in my desk drawer. I'd been building this for 6 months. 12 more days wouldn't change the math. But standing in my kitchen with Vivian's text glowing on my screen, I made a decision. If Patricia wanted to put 500 people in a room and hand herself a microphone, she was welcome to it. The night before the gala, my mom tried on her dress in my bathroom. JCPenney clearance rack. Navy blue. Simple cut. It fit better than she expected. She smoothed the fabric over her hips and turned in the mirror. Not bad for 58, she said. She pinned the pearl brooch above her heart. $12 plastic pearls on a gold tone pin. Under the bathroom light, they caught just enough glow to pass for something real. You look beautiful, Mom. She waved me off. I look clean. That's good enough. We sat on the couch after that. She found a cooking show. I watched her watch it, and I thought about everything I was carrying that she didn't know about. The manila folder. The shell company. The 3 months of silence from a man who promised he would handle it. You nervous? She asked. No, Mom. I'm ready. She glanced at me, held my eyes for a second, then turned back to the screen. Good. We didn't talk about Patricia. We didn't talk about seating charts or candle gifts or the word trash that hadn't yet been spoken into a microphone. We just sat there side by side, watching a woman on television knead dough like she had all the time in the world. My mom fell asleep at 9:30. I covered her with the throw blanket and turned off the TV. Stood in the dark living room and listened to her breathe. That was the last normal night. After tomorrow, nothing between us and the Carringtons would ever be normal again. The Waverly Club sat on 4 acres of manicured lawn in the hills above Greenwich. Valet parking. Stone columns. A ballroom that could hold 600 but was set for 500 tonight. Round tables draped in white. Orchid centerpieces. A stage with a podium and a projection screen. My mom and I arrived at 6:15. She had the brooch pinned above her heart. I wore a charcoal dress and flats. We were assigned table 14, near the back, between the emergency exit and the wait station. The Wentworths were at table 2. Patricia took the stage at 7:45. She wore ivory. Her hair was set in the kind of style that requires 2 hours and someone else's hands. She stood at the podium with the calm authority of a woman who had been running this show for 19 years. Tonight, she said, we honor the mothers who shaped us. The slideshow began. Black and white photographs of Carrington matriarchs. Howard's mother in pearls at a garden party. Patricia's mother, or the version of her mother she chose to display, holding a bouquet at a country club entrance. Each photo accompanied by a warm caption. Applause after every slide. Then Patricia paused. She looked out at the room. Her eyes found table 14. Of course, she said, not everyone here tonight came from the same tradition. A ripple of nervous laughter from Vivian's table. Derek, sitting at table 3, smiled. Patricia lifted her chin. She looked at my mother. At the navy dress. At the plastic brooch. At the woman who had bandaged thousands of children's knees for $38,000 a year. And she said it. That's not a mother. That's trash. The room cracked open. Half the guests gasped. The other half froze. Vivian clapped twice before catching herself. The sound echoed off the chandelier. Derek laughed. Full. Audible. Unmistakable. Patricia's laugh followed. High-pitched. Practiced. Rehearsed over decades of performing superiority in rooms full of people too polite to object. 500 people heard it. My mother did not crumble. She did not cry. She folded her napkin, set it on the table, and looked at me. Her hands were shaking. The pearl brooch caught the overhead light, and for 1 second, it looked real. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. I didn't stand up fast. I took a breath. Counted to 3. Folded my own napkin and placed it beside my plate. Then I reached across the table and took my mother's hand. We stood together. I didn't look at Patricia. I didn't look at Derek. I didn't scan the room for sympathy or outrage or whatever 500 faces were doing in that moment. I looked at the exit. We walked slow. Steady. My heels clicked against the marble floor, and the only other sound was the hum of the air conditioning and the absence of every voice in that ballroom. No one stopped us. No one said a word. The parking lot was dark and cool. May in Connecticut. The kind of night where the air smells like cut grass and diesel from the valet stand. My mom stood next to the car and looked at me. I'm sorry, baby. Don't, I said. Don't you dare apologize. She pressed her lips together and nodded. I pulled my phone from my clutch. Opened contacts. Scrolled to web. He picked up on the second ring. Still at the office. The man worked later than anyone I'd ever met. Filed a report with the AG tonight. Pause. You sure? Do it now. Understood. I put the phone back in my clutch, helped my mom into the car, and drove out of the Waverly Club parking lot with the headlights cutting through the dark and neither of us saying a word. The radio played soft jazz from a station neither of us had chosen. By morning, the Connecticut Attorney General's office had the Carrington Foundation file on a desk in Hartford. I sat in my mom's kitchen at midnight. Still in my dress. Still smelling like orchid centerpieces and regret that wasn't mine to carry. She brought me tea. Neither of us said anything for a long time. The next morning, my phone buzzed at 7:14. Derek had added me to a family group chat by accident. He meant to remove me. I opened it and read backward through the night. Patricia posted at 11:42 p.m. Well. That was dramatic. Vivian at 11:51, I can't believe she just left like that. So embarrassing. Howard at 12:03 a.m., let her cool down. She'll come back. They always do. Derek at 12:15 a.m., she's overreacting. Mom barely said anything. I read that line 3 times. Mom barely said anything. She called my mother trash in front of 500 people. Into a microphone. On a stage. And his summary was barely said anything. I screenshotted every message. Calm. Methodical. The way I would document any audit trail. Then I scrolled further. There was one more message, sent earlier than the others, from Patricia to Derek only, forwarded into the group chat by mistake. Timestamp 6:18 p.m. Before the gala even started. Make sure the nurse doesn't sit near the Hendersons. I won't have her embarrass us again. The nurse. Not Ellen. Not your future mother-in-law. Not even Ingrid's mom. The nurse. I stared at that word on my screen until the letters stopped looking like letters. Patricia hadn't just insulted my mother on impulse after too much wine. She had planned it. The seating. The tribute segment. The timing. The word trash wasn't a slip. It was a conclusion she had reached long before she stepped on that stage. Derek showed up at my apartment the next afternoon. He didn't call first. He knocked twice and stood in the hallway with his hands in his pockets and the face of a man who had practiced a speech on the drive over. "We need to talk." I let him in. Didn't offer coffee. Didn't sit down. "My mom is devastated," he said. "She hasn't stopped crying since the gala." I let that sit in the air for a moment. "Your mom called mine trash in front of 500 people, Derek. She didn't mean it like that. You know how she gets after wine." She said it into a microphone. "There's no didn't mean it." He shifted his weight. Then his tone changed. Harder. "What did you do?" "Webb called Dad's office this morning. Something about an audit." "I did what I should have done 3 months ago." "You went to the authorities without telling me." "I told you 6 months ago." "You told me to wait." "I waited." "You told me it was being handled." "It wasn't." Derek's eyes moved to the kitchen table. The manila folder sat there. Red tabs up. He stared at it the way you stare at something you hoped would disappear if you ignored it long enough. "You're going to destroy my family," he said. "Your family destroyed mine first." He stood there for 10 seconds. I counted. Then he turned, walked to the door, and left without closing it. I closed it for him. Then I locked it. The deadbolt clicked, and the apartment was quiet again. Vivian worked fast. 48 hours after the gala, she had called every person in the Carrington orbit with a story that bore no resemblance to what actually happened. The version Vivian told, Ingrid Myers, a woman from Bridgeport with no family money and an accounting degree, had wormed her way into the Carrington circle and was now attempting to extort the family. Fabricated financial documents. Bitter about a wedding that wasn't happening fast enough. Wanted money. The version Vivian didn't tell, $340,000 in phantom vendor payments traced to an account under Patricia's maiden name. My work phone rang on a Wednesday. A client I'd worked with for 2 years said she needed to put things on pause. Another client canceled a meeting without rescheduling. A mutual friend from the Stanford Professional Network texted, "Is it true you're suing them for money?" I didn't respond to any of it. I went to work. I ate lunch at my desk. I filed quarterly reports for 3 other clients. I drove to my mom's house after work and sat at her kitchen table while she made chicken and rice. "People are talking," she said. "Let them." She looked at me, set a plate down. "You eating?" "Yes, Mom." She sat across from me, and we ate without talking about Patricia or Vivian or the fact that my professional reputation was being dismantled by a woman whose primary qualification was being married to Howard's brother. Vivian had 72 hours of narrative control. I had 6 years of invoices, 3 copies of a forensic audit file, and the patience of a woman who grew up eating cereal for dinner. Howard called on a Thursday morning. 8:17 a.m. His number showed up as H. Carrington. I had saved it during the engagement as a gesture of courtesy I no longer felt. His voice was calm. Measured. The voice of a man who had spent 40 years turning confrontation into negotiation. "Ingrid, I think we can resolve this like adults." "I'm listening." "The bookkeeping issue, it's been corrected. Patricia has repaid the discrepancy from personal funds. The foundation's accounts are whole." "When did she repay it?" Silence. "This week." "After the report was filed, Mr. Carrington." Longer silence. I could hear him breathing. "The report has already been filed with the Attorney General's office." "Filed? With whom exactly?" "The Charitable Trust Unit. They handle nonprofit fraud investigations in Connecticut." That was unnecessary, his voice dropped. "And vindictive. $340,000 from a children's program isn't a bookkeeping error, Mr. Carrington." It's theft. You will regret this. Noted. I hung up. Set the phone on my desk. My hands were steady. Howard knew the bookkeeping error line he had fed Derek 3 months ago wasn't confusion. It was cover. He had signed every one of those authorization forms. His name was on the bottom of each page, right next to the routing number that led to his wife's maiden name account. He wasn't calling to negotiate. He was calling to find out how much I knew and whether I could be scared into silence. The answer to the first question was everything. The answer to the second was no. I packed Derek's things on a Friday. It took 1 box. A Harvard sweatshirt he'd left on my chair. 2 books about wine regions he would never finish. A phone charger. A pair of running shoes with the laces still tied. The small things that accumulate when someone is becoming part of your life and then stops. The ring sat on my nightstand. 1 carats. Platinum setting. Patricia had picked it out. She told Derek exactly which jeweler to visit, which cut to choose, which setting would photograph well at the engagement party she had already planned before Derek asked the question. I put the ring on top of the box. I drove to Derek's office, a shared workspace in downtown Stamford with glass walls and too much natural light. He wasn't at his desk. I left the box with the receptionist. There was a note tucked under the ring. I loved you. But I don't owe anyone my integrity. He called twice that afternoon. I let both go to voicemail. He didn't leave a message either time. I drove to my mom's house. She opened the door and looked at my left hand. Bare ring finger. No diamond catching the porch light. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't say, "I told you so." She didn't list the red flags she had catalogued for 14 months and never mentioned. She stepped aside and said, "Come in, baby." I made soup. We ate soup. We watched the news. She fell asleep on the couch at 9, and I covered her with the same blanket from the night before the gala. The engagement ended on a Tuesday. The investigation began on a Wednesday. The Connecticut Attorney General's Charitable Trust Unit opened a formal inquiry in late May. An investigator named Ruiz called at 9:06 a.m. to ask if I had time to discuss my filing. I had time. I provided everything. Bank routing numbers. Hartfield Consulting's Delaware LLC registration. 3 years of authorization forms with Howard's signature on every page. The full forensic timeline showing $113,000 per year flowing from a children's charity to an account under Patricia's maiden name. Ruiz listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "Thank you. We've assigned this to our active investigations unit." How long? I can't give you a timeline. But the documentation is thorough. That helps. The numbers spoke. They always do. Numbers don't need a microphone or a stage or 500 witnesses. They just need someone willing to read them. The following week, a small article appeared in the Hartford Courant. Back section. 4 paragraphs. Carrington Foundation under review by State Attorney General. No names. No details. Just enough to let people know that something was moving. I didn't celebrate. I went to work. I filed 3 client reports. I ate a sandwich at my desk. I called my mom and asked about her garden. "Tomatoes are coming in early this year," she said. "Save me some." Always. I hung up and stared at the newspaper clipping I had printed and pinned above my desk. 4 paragraphs buried on page 9. By the time this was over, it would be front page. Patricia hired a PR firm within 72 hours. A polished woman in a gray suit released a statement on behalf of the foundation. The foundation welcomes transparency and is fully cooperating with all inquiries. Cooperating. Patricia used that word like it was a shield instead of what it actually was, an admission that there was something to cooperate about. Behind the statement, Patricia was working the phones. I found out from my former employer. An HR contact at the Big Four firm called me on a Monday. "Just so you know," she said, "someone named Patricia Carrington contacted us last week asking about your personnel file. We declined. She asked for my personnel file. Said she was conducting a reference check. They told her they don't release employee records to private individuals. She wasn't happy about it. Patricia was trying to find something. A disciplinary note. A poor review. Anything she could use to discredit the woman who had found her shell company. She wouldn't find anything. 6 years. Clean record. 2 promotions. 3 days later, my mom called. "I got a letter," she said. "From Patricia. Handwritten. Cream stationery." I drove over and read it at the kitchen table. "Dear Elaine, I am sorry for any misunderstanding. I was nervous that night. You know how speeches go wrong. I hope we can put this behind us. Family is everything. Warmly, Patricia." I read it twice. "Set it down. Mom. She spelled your name wrong." Ellen looked at the letter. "Elaine," she read. Then she folded it and put it in the recycling bin. 14 months. She never learned my mother's name. 14 months she had been in my life, and she did not know my mother's name. She called her the nurse. She called her trash. And when she finally put pen to paper, she wrote "Dear Elaine." My mother's name is Ellen. If that detail doesn't tell you everything you need to know about Patricia Carrington, keep listening. Because it gets worse. Georgia Hale called me on a Tuesday evening. I didn't recognize the number. She introduced herself as the event coordinator who had worked the Mother's Day Gala. 6 years running. Every Carrington event from the spring fundraiser to the holiday auction. "I heard about the investigation," she said. "I want you to know something." I sat down. "Okay." I was backstage when she said it. The venue records all main stage audio for liability. Every speech, every announcement, every toast. It's all on file. Including what she said about your mother. I closed my eyes. "You have a recording. The venue has a recording. Standard practice. Microphone feed goes directly to a backup drive. I can connect you with the facility manager." "Why are you telling me this?" Georgia was quiet for a moment. "I've worked 6 Carrington events. Last year during the scholarship awards, Patricia humiliated a 17-year-old girl in front of the entire room. Called her a charity case who should be grateful to even be here. The girl cried. Nobody said a thing. Nobody ever does. Patricia writes the checks. People look the other way." Georgia offered to provide the audio file and a written statement to the AG investigator. She would also testify to the pattern. 6 years of events. 6 years of watching Patricia treat people like props in a performance about her own generosity. "I should have done this years ago," she said. "You're doing it now." I hung up and sat in the dark for a long time. The venue recording wasn't a secret tape. It wasn't something I had arranged. It was standard liability procedure. Every event space in Connecticut kept mainstage audio. The truth had been on file the whole time. Nobody had asked for it until now. The Carrington Foundation Board called an emergency session in mid-June. 9 members plus the AG investigator. Conference room in the Foundation's Stamford office. Fluorescent lights. Bottled water. Legal pads. And the quiet tension of people who were about to learn that the organization they trusted had been robbed from the inside. Investigator Ruiz presented the preliminary findings. 3 years of payments to Hartfield Consulting LLC. $340,000 total. Vendor has no employees, no office, no evidence of any services rendered. All payments routed to a personal bank account registered under the maiden name of the board chair. The room didn't erupt. It contracted. 9 faces rearranging themselves around a fact they could not undo. 2 board members resigned on the spot. Stood up, collected their bags, and walked out without saying anything beyond "I had no knowledge of this." Which was probably true. That's how embezzlement works. It hides in the spaces between the people who should be watching. Howard tried. He sat at the far end of the table in a navy blazer with monogrammed cuffs and said, "This is a family foundation. These are internal matters." The board chair, an independent member named Caldwell, a retired judge, looked at Howard over her glasses. "Mr. Carrington, you are the treasurer. These payments were authorized under your signature." Howard's face went gray. Not red. Not defiant. Gray. The color of a man watching a door close that he cannot reopen. Patricia was not in the room. She had been asked not to attend. The board meeting lasted 3 hours. The vote took 11 minutes. Unanimous. 7-0. The two who resigned had already left. 7-0. Patricia removed as board chair. Howard removed as treasurer. Both stripped of all foundation access, accounts, email, office keys, donor lists. Effective immediately. The board mandated a full referral to the Attorney General for further action. An external auditor would be brought in to review every transaction for the past 5 years. The foundation's programs, the tutoring, the summer reading, the weekend camps, would continue under interim leadership. The children would still be served. That mattered to me more than anything else in that room. After the vote, I was told what happened in the hallway. Georgia Hale described it to me later, her voice flat and precise, the way it gets when someone is recounting something they wish they hadn't seen. Patricia stood outside the conference room door crying. But the words coming out of her mouth were not "I'm sorry." They were "How dare they." Vivian was at her side, gripping her arm. "They can't do this to you, Pat. You built that foundation." Patricia's chin trembled.